Welcome, this is Maya Dynamics Level 1, Week 11. We're going to do a bit of a freestyle class today. So I'm taking suggestions from Julius and from Shabana. There seems to be one already for dents. Well, Julius wanted to see on the side of a car. I don't have a car model handy, okay, right in front of me. But I'll do a piece of geometry, it works the same for you. So there's nothing different in that. And like I was saying, Shabana and Julius, I might be able to do this quickly, so we can squeeze another example that you might want to do. All right, so by all means. Okay, I'll clear that on the recording. I was telling the guys to give me suggestions of things they wanted to see today. Excuse me, but to try to keep it related to level 1. And the reason I actually told them, don't ask me to do a tornado because that's not really level 1 material. A tornado, you will do it with fluids, particles emitting fluids, Maya fluids, and that's something that we haven't talked about in this level. But if you want, you can watch my level 2 recordings, and by all means, you should be able to do a tornado with no problem. That was just try to keep it related to particles, soft bodies, instancing, things that we talked about in this level here. But anyway, so let's to dent some geometry. Right? It's like I was saying, it's similar. We've done a similar example already, but we did it with the footprints. Remember, we used a soft body for the ground. Let me see. I can open the scene. Foot impacts. Let me just try to find it. 1 second. So this thing by name. So probably here, week 9, we did footprints. So for the footprints, we created, remember, a piece of geometry for the ground. We had a couple of characters running on top of it, which I believe I put that scene on the FTP for you guys, for all the live session students and for all the content supporter people. So we had this. Remember, so this, in a way, okay, is denting geometry. So don't think of this as the ground. Probably look at it sideways, and that could be a metal panel. Yeah, of course, this is being dented by geometry colliding with the ground. And you wanted to see, Julie, you were wondering about just particles actually doing something like this. So we can try to figure out a way. I was trying to tell you earlier that denting geometry is something that probably we can do on level 2 more easily. But I'll give you a bit of a hint. I mean, I give you an idea what you could do, and then it's not going to be perfect, but it's something that it gives you a starting point. Okay. So for something like that, I'm just going to go make an empty scene, make a piece of geo to start with. Let's just start with a do a polyplane to make it simple. I'm going to put that guy sideways. And we need to give it some detail. So the way it's going to work is the particles, as you know, they can collide with geometry. That's totally fine. We've done that one before. So if I were to do it with the material that you have on level 1, well, the information that we have covered together here, I will use a soft body. So I'm going to make myself some space, and I'm going to give this plane quite a bit of detail. So I'm going to subdivide this plane, let's say 40 times. This is not a lot, okay? We can put a lot more, I just don't know. Let me just try to make it more. Something like this. Depending, of course, on how detailed you want these dents to be. That's the thing. So, let me just double check you guys here. All right, let me just take a quick look. That seems different than when you downloaded. You downloaded probably the version. I didn't give you with the footprints already made. I gave you the characters walking on the ground, and you have to make the footprints. That's why it probably is different. The scene, I'm wondering you are talking about that. So yeah, that's the reason. Let me double check what you're typing. I know that the completed scene, I didn't upload it because I don't tend to do that. But you should have the character walking, the walk cycle of the character. Let's give it another minute, see what you're writing in there. All right, well, don't worry, you keep typing and I'll come. Oh, there you go. Yeah, just the alien. I think that's fine. You know, I don't remember uploading the human character. I could, if you want the human one as well. It's not a problem. That's fine. But yeah, it wouldn't have any footprints in the scene. That's for sure. All right. So anyway, so depends on how detailed you want how close the camera is going to be, and that happens to every effect you do. So you probably need to put more detail, less detail. Who knows? For this. For what we're going to do today is fine. So remember, we have to go to the dynamics menu, soft and rigid bodies. We're going to make a soft body. I'm going to use the duplicate, make original soft. It's totally fine. And I'm going to put the gold weight for now to 0. And we're going to hit create. As we've seen before in the previous lessons that we took, particle system gets created there. So a particle per every vertex. And these guys will respond to collisions, okay? To not only to collisions, to motion and forces and everything. Now, one thing is, if you wanted to do it this way, is that particles are not able to collide with other particles. That's not possible. So I'm going to show you a way to fake it. Okay. Remember, I was saying if you wanted to do this effect, we probably would use nCloth or something like that. So actually, I'm covering nCloth. I did one class last week on level 2, and I'm doing the second class today after your class right now. So if you're curious about that, of course, go watch week 10 and week 11 of level 2, and that's nCloth related conversations. But for now, what I can do is, let's go ahead and make ourselves a little particle emitter, something to shoot this piece of geometry with. Any will do. I should have apologized at the beginning. I don't know if you're gonna be able to catch some noise from the background where I am. It's just that I moved from the place I used to live in France. It was very quiet, very small, to the center of Paris, and I didn't know that was so loud in here. So if you catch any extra ambulance or police or whatever, bear with me. I'm just living in the city now, and it's quite noisy. So seems to be actually a concert now on the street, which is worse. But hopefully it's not that annoying for you. All right, so I'm gonna make myself a little volume emitter, and I'm just gonna shoot some particles towards that piece of geometry. So let's grab the particles, and I'm going to use, actually I'm going to use the emitter itself. It has a velocity that we can use. So I can grab the away from axis, get that to 0, away from center to 0, and I'm going to use the along axis to 1, and you can see that it gives me a way to shoot, right? So a direction for these particles. It would behave pretty much almost as a directional emitter at the moment, right? So if I hit play, I get this kind of deal. I'm going to reduce the rate. We don't need that many particles at all. Let's do 10, and I'm also going to increase the along axis to a value, let's say, of 100, just to shoot them faster. And I think I am. It's just they're very fast. So here they go. There are my particles, and I'm also going to give them, well, I guess if there are bullets, they will probably die right on collision. The thing is, let me just show you. Let me show you a couple of things. Let's say that these are my bullets, and I'm going to make them, to see them easier, I'm going to make them streaks, because they fly quite quick, so they should look cool. There you go. So this is easier to read as a bullet. If you make them collide with the geometry, if you grab those two and then you go to particles, make collide, this geometry, even though it's a soft body, is not going to respond. To make it less confusing, I'm going to grab these particles, the particles of the soft body, and I'm going to make them transparent, just so I don't have to deal with them in the scene, right? So I'm just going to, I don't want to see them, they're kind of confusing me here. So I'm going to grab this on a per object attribute, I'm going to apply opacity to all the particles at the same time, instead of doing it on a per particle basis. That way, if I go to 5, I don't see the particles anymore. But I do see my bullets, which is good. Okay, so perfect. So I was saying that these particles are colliding with the piece of geometry. If I rewind and play this, the geometry is not going to deform in any way. So let's just hit it. Okay, the particles, some are passing through because they're flying quite fast. I'm going to reduce this a little, the speed, just to make it easy to see. Grab in there, the long axis, let's just reduce that to 50 for now. And shoot them. Okay, you can see that they're passing through. Let's just double check that these guys are really colliding with the soft body geometry. So there you go. Particles may collide. Now it seems to be fine. I guess before it didn't take the geoconnector. Yeah, the collision itself. So now it should be okay. If you want to play this. Alright, so these particles are still passing through, which is a bit weird. It shouldn't be. If this happens to you, don't panic. It's totally fine. We can just double check and see what's going on. They don't seem to be bouncing at all, right? And it's because I think on my selection, let me just double check what I grabbed here. It seems to be okay. There's a geoconnector here. There's no resilience and no friction. We can check it, okay? There's no bounciness or friction at all. So the particles, they still should stop at the piece of geometry. They shouldn't go through. But I can just test it by putting some sort of bounciness back in here. The resilience, let's go ahead and put it. If we put it to 1, they're going to shoot back in the exact direction where they come from. So let's see if that happens. Right, so I don't see any collisions whatsoever. Which is okay with me, you know. I can bring in this plane, the original plane. Remember that we did duplicate, make original soft to make the soft body. Let's make these two collide. Let's make the particles and this thing collide. So particles may collide. And let's check if the collision happens on that one. And it does happen, okay? So that's what I was saying earlier, okay? Don't panic. It is just that particles cannot collide with soft bodies. And particles cannot, well, with soft bodies they should be able to collide, but they cannot collide with other particles. So doing that effect, okay, that you want, it wouldn't be possible using particles as collisions, okay? I'm going to show you how you do it, how you go around that one. So I'm going to make them points, you can see them, so they're here. They collide fine, you know, we haven't done anything different. I'm going to put that over there. If you just try them out now with the soft body, they pass through. Well, it's hard for you to see, but there you go. So they're passing through. So that option is out. I'm going to put this thing back where it belongs, and I'm going to hide it. And the way you're going to do this is actually using the bullets, which I can probably rename them for, you know, make it everything easier on you. The bullets, they're going to be force fields. They're going to be affecting the particles of the soft body. That is fine. That can happen. I'm going to remove the collision option. Even though it's not working, I still want to be able to remove that. So let me just turn that off. Turn that off. This dynamic relationship is so buggy on my version of Maya. It's horrible. Let's see now. Okay, so it should be okay. Remember, I think I mentioned that before, but if you want to make sure if your particles are colliding or not with an object, just look down here when you select them. If you read geoconnector, it's because it is colliding with something. Let's just double check that. Okay, so now they snapped out and it seems to be working fine. The collisions. Before it wasn't. I have two geoconnectors, as you can see. One is for the collision with the soft body, one is for the collision with the other piece of geometry. So, like I said before, particles should collide with soft bodies, but particles won't be able to deform it anyway. So you can see here, even though they're colliding, I'm going to make these particles something better. So, spheres or something. There you go. Even though they're colliding, they're not deforming at all the surface. Let's go ahead and take the resilience. I put it to 1. Put that to 0, and you can see that they stay there, but they hit the ground. Even though the soft body is able to deform, particles are not going to be able to do it. If you're using end particles and you're using end cloth, that is a different story. That happens. It's a lot easier. So what I'm going to do here is take these particles and turn them into force fields. They're going to push the particles of the soft body. That's going to be the way around it if you didn't want to use end particles or end cloth. You know? So for that, it's simple. You're going to grab the particles of the bullets, okay, and I'm going to make a radial field. Okay? A radial field, remember that it pushes particles away from the center out. Now what I want is not really a field like this one. I don't want a localized force that's just going to sit there. What I want is each one of these particles to become that force field. And if you think about it, that's how you would fake interparticle collisions with regular Maya particles. Like I said before, end particles can collide with each other, that's fine, but regular particles can't. The way to fake it, the way to go around it, is to do what I'm going to do. So you're going to take this radial field and tell Maya to use it on every particle as if it was its own source, okay? And given that the particles emit the force and they're also affected by the force, when two particles come close to each other, they're going to repel themselves. And how do you control how strong and how far the influence of that field? Well, simply by playing with the magnitude. That's how strong they will, repel themselves, or even attract themselves. Okay, you could even make them attract themselves by using negative magnitudes in here. Your attenuation is going to mean that the force is going to weaken. Remember, from the center out. So it will mean that from the center of every particle to the edge, or to whatever, from the center out. Away from it, the force, is going to weaken based on the attenuation. And even more precise than that, you have what is called the max distance, which is a distance in Maya units that you can use to establish the influence of this force. So let's say, for example, my particles right now, they have a radius, I believe it's a radius of 0.5. We can measure them, we can look at them. I think the particles have, or actually, it's a radius of 1, right? So I can use a max distance, for example. If I use a max distance of 1, means that this particle is going to use, when they come into contact or they come close to each other within 1 unit, they're going to push each other apart. So remember, this is a fake collision. It's not really a collision. Now, how do you turn this field into a per particle field, let's say? You select the field first. You shift select your particles. And then under the fields menu, you have something here that says you selected a source of field. Keep an eye on my outliner when I do it. Okay, you can see that the field gets parented underneath. It's not just that, but now each particle is a field. There's one last thing you need to do for this to work. Is select the field and turn on apply per vertex. This option here. Otherwise, the effect is not complete. Even though the particles are force fields, it's not really on a per point basis, let's say. So you have to turn this on, apply per vertex. Put that to on. Okay, so now I'm going to take the attenuation off, and I'm going to specify a max distance, let's say, of 2 units. It's a bit bigger than the particle, just to show you how it works, okay? So no attenuation. This force field is as strong as it can be with a magnitude of 5. The magnitude of 5 means it's going to repel, okay, from the center of the particle away. With that strength, it's going to remain the same strength for 2 units from the center of each particle out. And this field is affecting these guys. So not much on the plane itself, nothing is going to happen yet. But you will see the particles will behave a little different. When they start to group, you see how they separate? Okay, it's because they are pushing each other. You can probably come in a bit closer here. You will see some interpenetration. And we can solve this by making the field, the max distance, a bit bigger. But you can see that at some point they just start to repel themselves. And it gives you a bit of an idea that these guys are kind of pushing each other. You could, let's go ahead and amplify a little bit the max distance. So you can see now there is less interpenetration. All right, let's come into the point of contact here. And let's go frame by frame if you want. So it's a little bit of interpenetration, but keep an eye on these 3 guys. If you keep moving forward, they separate automatically. They start to find their way around. Okay, so this is how you fake by the way, a bonus here. This is how you fake interparticle collisions with regular particles. How do I turn that into denting this surface? Well, no problem. First of all, I'm going to make this part, for this to work perfectly, I think, I will have to make this bullet pass through this piece of geometry. I don't think it's appropriate, but I'll show you both ways, right? And you can turn one effect into something completely different just by switching one number. If I leave it as it is, okay, what I need to do for these particles to affect that surface is just connect the radial field that each one of them carries, connect that to, let me just go in here, connect that to the particles of the soft body. So grab in there, grab my particles, and I'm going to plug them in under the field section to that radial field. That turns it on. It's going to look funny, I'll show you anyway. But this, I'm sure it gives you a million ideas. It looks funky like this. It's fine because the particles of the field here, I'm sorry, of the metal, let's call this the metal, the particles have a conserved value of 1. We have talked about this many times. This means that these particles get hit once and they continue to move with nothing to stop them for infinity. That's why these guys are taking this kind of funky shape. But if I were to take this number and put that conserved to 0, they will only move when they're in contact with a particle that is pushing them with a force in this case. So it will look different now. Okay, so this is not really bullets yet, and the only reason is because the particles, the influence area, okay, of each particle, the max distance is 4. So if I show you the grid, and let's look at this probably from the front, not from the side view. Okay, each particle has 4 units around. So from each particle will be 2 units and 2 units to push these particles away. So they're quite big. We did that to avoid interparticle collisions. Like I said, this technique is not perfect, but we're getting there, right? I'm going to grab my radial field and I'm going to put my max distance to 1. And if these are bullets, okay, you wouldn't really care. You wouldn't really see if they're interpenetrating. And first of all, I'm going to stop them from bouncing. I'm just going to have them pass through, and it will be more realistic. I just want to show you how you can do many effects with this technique and just do some variations, right? Even as a modeling tool, again, it works quite nicely. So let's run it now with we had a max distance of 4, now we have a max distance of 1. So we'll run this guy. It's a bit hard, okay, there is something going on. If you take a look, something going on. I think we've seen the particles enough, so I'm going to make them points so we focus the attention on what really matters. I'm going to grab these particles, make them points. Okay, so you can start to see some denting. How do you make this a bit stronger? Easy. You can just grab this and take your magnitude, for example, double it. Let's try now. There we go. So they're starting to get some dents. Okay. Well, we need to fix a few things. Okay, we need to make sure that the goal weight of certain areas is set to 1. Okay, right now, like I said, these particles can move freely. Even though I took the conserve out, you can, the reason you see these kind of canals here, these kind of lines, is just because the bullets are not really passing through. That's what I was trying to say earlier. So if I grab my particles, or if I make them again spheres, these particles remember what's happening here. These particles are force fields. They collide once, make a dent, but then they slide through the surface. And that's what makes those kind of ugly lines, right? But this effect could be something different, right? With this technique, it could be something different. So, there you go. If you want to make them bullets, like I said, you have to make them pass through. So to make them pass through is very easy. I don't really care for the collision, first of all. I could just disconnect the collision altogether, which is cheaper than anything else. Let's just keep an eye on here. Okay, so I got 2 collisions. One of them, which doesn't even matter because it's colliding with this plane over here, the one that is hidden. I'm going to remove both collisions. So I'm going to keep, because my dynamic relationship is very buggy, I'm going to keep an eye in here and make sure that when I click, these guys go away. So dynamic relationships, just go put them over here. Keep an eye in there. I'm going to go to the collisions, and I'm going, even though in your computer it's probably is fine, it's like it's blue, so it looks clear that it's selected. In mine, I don't know why it does this. But if I click on it once, that's the way it should look on your computer. If I click it again, you can see the one went away. I'm going to do the same for the other. Now these particles are not colliding at all. And now we're going to get the dents that we really want, because these guys are just going to pass through, and that's it. So let's just let them play. Hopefully you can, well, I can make this probably wireframe unshaded. Can you see that? Well, I'm gonna increase it a lot more, but you know, of course, this is not really like bullets. This is more like something lighter, or BB or something, you know. Anyway, but there you go. You can kind of see that the geometry is getting indented. It works at real time. Like I said before, if you want to make this thing more noticeable, no problem. You can go in and increase a few things. You can either increase the magnitude of that field, because the way you need to think of this is this particle here, or any of those particles for that matter, okay, carries a radial field which only, which affects the particles of the metal surface, the soft body, for a fraction of a second, probably. If you track them, these particles take, let's say keep an eye on this guy right here. He hasn't touched the metal yet in one frame, and then on the next frame, he's passed through it. So that's totally fine. Okay, so basically what I'm trying to say is that the influence of that field over that geometry is very, very short. So you have to amplify things to make it more, noticeable. So there's nothing wrong with, for example, I would prefer to increase the magnitude of the field as opposed to increasing the max distance. And the reason behind that is that if you wanted to render the bullets, as something, as little spheres or something, I don't know. If you make the max distance too big, you're going to get a dent before the particle hits the surface, and that's going to come up. It's going to look weird, So it's better to keep the particle, the max distance small, okay, but the magnitude very strong. So the little fraction of time that they pass through that, they really have time. They really have enough strength to move everything around. So I make that magnitude 4 times stronger than what we had before. So now we should be able to see something. Okay, you can see now it feels more dramatic. Okay, so and now to spice it up a little, we can just grab this this field here and then give it a little bit of away from center, just so the bullets get shot out in different directions a bit more, right? So let's see, give it a bit more away from center. I'm just doing that just so you can see impacts in other areas. So there you go. The trick is here, of course, that the max, the goal weight of the soft body particles is 0. Okay, so that means that these particles and the conserve is also 0. So these guys. The conserve is 0, meaning that they will only move when those bullets pass through. And then the goal weight of those particles is 0, meaning that this surface is not going to come back to the original shape. But if you want to start experimenting with fun stuff, then you can go in and give these particles, for example, a goal weight of 0.5. So these particles are going to try to come back to the flat shape, but they're going to keep getting hit by others. Right? So let's see what happens there. I'm just going to modify now your result. Okay, so for different kind of look. And I'm going to grab this radial field, and I'm definitely going to increase the magnitude of it. So I'm going to go in and put that to, let's say, 120. Okay, so you can kind of see how you can get a different look for something else. I don't know, music, playing to the tune of music. I don't know what this could be, but this is due to the fact of the goal weight. It's kind of bringing these particles back into the original shape. And of course, you can play with how fast that happens. Okay, so gold weight that right now is 0.5, which is quite strong. So if you do 0.1, for example, it'll be a smoother transition here. And you can combine this, of course, with other techniques, right? You could emit geometry. I'm sorry, not geometry, but even geometry using the instancer of little debris kind of coming out. Okay, you can go and do many things here. Now, one thing that you probably know, I don't know if you're noticing, is that the impacts, some of them are phasing in, some are phasing out. You can see here? And if this is bullets, there will always be phasing back there. So, why is that happening? Actually, just for the hell of it, I'm just going to go in and ask you directly. Why is that happening? What do you think that's happening? Julius and Shobana, what do you think the geometry is like that? Because if it's a bullet and if we're pushing that, the geometry should always be facing back. You shouldn't have dents facing the opposite side, where the bullet is coming from. So why do you think that's happening? Don't be shy, Shobana, you too. I'll give you guys a second to think about it. I usually don't, I should do more participation in my classes, but sometimes I have so many things to say that I don't have time to question. But I think today is different. So, any ideas why that's going on? Hopefully those of you watching the recording will also be trying to figure out why. And then I'll tell you why. Springs, or you think it has to do with the what? Sorry, let me just. My TV is far away. I can't see the resilience, the bounciness. I think you're meaning, Julius, right? I think Julius is saying that has to be with the resilience. Okay, so you think it has to do with the resilience, and Shobana, you think it has to be done with this? Is due to a spring. There's no springs in the scene. I'll give you one more guess, Shobana. Well, you think of think of that. I'm gonna talk to Julius in this. So the resilience, in this case, the resilience is 0. There is no bounciness. So that's not really the case. So these particles have first of all, there's no collisions whatsoever. We remove the collisions with both geometries. So resilience is not a factor. Something else. It's something else. In your case, Shobana, there's no springs either. We haven't created any yet. You could create a spring if you wanted, Shobana, to make the deformation softer, kind of what we did on the example with the water. So right now you can see that these particles are kind of the rough. Depends on the kind of material you're rendering. But springs, even though they don't exist, so they're not the reason why, for example, this dent is facing the opposite way. Let's see if Julius has another guess. Or the radial field from each particle. You're getting closer. What about the radial field from each particle? That is more appropriate. This is more what's happening. It definitely has to do with the radial field. Let's see. It's not that I don't want to tell you. This is just more fun. See if you're awake. It definitely has to do with the radial field. The radial field. I want to give Julius his time to shine here. Let's see. You can use a microphone too. Don't be shy. It's faster than typing. It's always an option. It's causing the bullets to bounce off each other, and then some are bouncing back. Not quite, but okay. But that's good thinking. That is a good thinking. How do we know if that's true? What I can do is this. I can grab the particles, the bullets, okay, which have the radial field connected to them, and is also a source. So because I don't care about them touching each other, because they wouldn't touch each other and I wouldn't be able to see it, I'm going to disconnect it. Okay, so look at this. The bullets, okay, are emitting the radial field, but they're not affected by it. And I'm pretty sure we're going to get the same result. So let's rewind, let's play, and we get the same result. Just let it run a bit longer, same result. So I'll tell you why, but it's a good thinking. It is definitely due to that. So this, what's happening is, if you analyze the situation, I'm going to make these guys back, make them spheres again. All right. So think of each particle again as a radial field. In the radial field, let's look at this guy. Is from the center away as a sphere, right? So what's happening in this case is that these particles are passing through, and let's say, for example, in the case of this guy right here, okay, the velocity or the radial field, remember, it's a spherical shape. So there are vectors of velocity pushing in all directions, including back. So this particle, when it's on this side, is going to be pushing the geometry in. But sometimes, like I showed you, a particle is in one frame. Let's go one frame forward. Okay, this particle still will push this geometry in. Let's see the next frame. Perfect. So this particle will translate into a perfect hit, a hit that will push the particle inside. But there are cases where this particle was in one frame here and the next frame is past the geometry. That means that the vectors of the radial field are pushing back, and that causes an inverted dent. That is the real reason why this is happening. If we can keep an eye on another particle, let's keep track of this one. And sometimes this particle can do both. It can do an internal dent, and then the next frame does one back. Right? It could easily happen. Let's keep an eye on another one. Okay, this particle is here on this frame. I don't think it's causing a dent yet. And I promise, I don't know, I think the next frame is going to be past it. Now the vector of this radial field, we got lucky here because it's further away from the influence area, but these vectors are facing now that way. So that way, right? A dent will happen in the opposite direction. That is why. So what you probably want to do in a case like this is turn off the field if the particles pass the geometry. So I'll show you this, and with this we'll end it. The class. I thought, I think it was a good example. You see, like I'm pretty sure. I hope that you guys pick up something useful from this. That was a good suggestion, Julius. I thought it was a lot simpler, but I like to always modify it and give you more ideas of the same example. So to solve that issue, we can just we can do a couple of things. You can do it based on collision of the geometry, if you want it. But or also you can just do it based on the position of the particle and the magnitude of that field, which I think is more appropriate for this. So what I'm going to do is say if the position of the particle, okay, is in this case less. You can see that this is my x-axis, it's pointing this way. If it's less than 0, and I know it's 0 because I haven't moved my plane. Yeah? In this case, I'm going to show you a couple ways. But I'm going to say with an expression, if that position of that particle is less than 0, then the magnitude of that field is going to be 0. And it's relatively easy, and with this, we finish the class, and next week is just a Q&A to finish the whole course. So what I'm going to do for this, the trick here is to make an attribute, because basically what I want to do is control this radial field on a per particle basis. Right? I want each particle to be able to turn on and off that field as I command, let's say. So what I'll do is, the trick is this. You're going to make an attribute, okay, per particle, and you're going to name this. It has to be a float, okay, just a number, not a vector. And you're going to name this up. This is exact. You have to do it exactly like this, or it won't work. You have to name this attribute exactly the same name of your field. Okay. So my field is called radial field 1, and then you have to put underscore magnitude. Let me just double check. My vision is not failing me here. Radial field 1. That's correct. Underscore magnitude. It has to be perfect like that, and if you change the name of this field after, it won't work anymore. So you have to be aware of this. It has to be exact match. Once I do this, I'm telling Maya that each particle is capable of controlling its own magnitude now, which is very powerful technique. So now I'm just going to go in and put an expression on creation. Creation is not really that important because the particles are never created on top of that surface. So But I'm going to put it in both, creation and in runtime. And I'm going to say that this guy, this is the attribute I want to control. Yeah? This is the one that's going to turn the magnitude on and off. I need to say that if the position of the particle is less than 0, then this value is going to be 0. Otherwise, it's going to be 100. In this case, I think I'm using 100 or 120. That is what I want to write. So remember, I always say that if you want to write mail, you have to tell it to yourself first. We have done similar examples before. So I'm going to say if the position of the particle in x, right, because that's the x-axis where these particles are traveling in, is less than 0, then this is 0. Otherwise, it's not. So I need to find first the position of the particle. And I believe we have done this one in this course as well. So I need to make the position is a vector. So I'm going to make a vector. And I'm going to call this $pos for position. And that's equal to position. We did this with the rain, I believe, and with other things. So that's it. This is going to give me the position. And then I'm going to say if $pos, which is my position, but in which axis? In x. Okay. If pos.x, position in x, okay, is less than 0, then okay, the magnitude of this field, if it's less than 0, means that it passed through already. And you can adjust this a little bit, to be able to get dent on top of dent or something, right? But let's say just to starters, if it's less than 0, then the magnitude of this field is 0. Okay. Else, then I'm going to copy this. Else means, of course, if not. If it's greater than 0, means that it's still on the collision side. Okay. And then if that's the case, then it's going to be equal to 120. You hit create. There are no mistakes. And the trick is to put this on creation, but also in runtime. In runtime is even more important to me. Because on runtime, you have to check every frame, right? If it's on this side or that side. So with that, let's go back to perspective view. Hit 5. And let's redo this one and see. Okay, getting in. We still have a few, they're doing it, so we have to probably force it. The ones that are still happening here, it could be because that particle is right at 0, so we need to take a look at that. So let's go ahead and tweak it, but it should be less dense facing. You can see that this part here is working well. There's just a couple of guys on here, so let's go ahead and tweak that expression quickly. And what I'm going to do is, instead of saying that if it's less than 0, because that means that the particle can be at 0, and if the particle is at 0 and it has a max distance of 1, then you still got vectors pushing in. So it could be So I'm going to try to say if it's less than 0.5. Okay, so it's a bit forward. Let's see if that fixes that a little bit. Let's try that. Yeah, that works. Although we'll still get a few dents in here. And these dents could be, actually, let me just see where this thing is facing. This could be just because also there are multiple collisions. You can see that this is already dented and it's getting hit again, so it's pushing the CVs in this way. But I can see that down here it's fine, right? Everything is kind of pushing in. This is for sure, this is definitely working. It's just, I think it's just that it's getting hammered too many times in here. This is becoming mush. But it's definitely working. If you want to double check if it's true, okay? So basically you need to just grab the particles and remember that you have a particle type called numeric. The numeric type, you can ask for an attribute. Oops, sorry, that's not what I want. I wanted radial field 1 underscore magnitude. So you can see that it's 120 on this side and 0 on that side. As soon as they pass through, they go from 120. Oh, this guy, one of them passed through and it was still 120. That has to do just with the precision of the evaluation in here. 120, so it takes him an extra frame to become 0 here, so that's just evaluation speed. So And also, let me just double check. Right, so that is fine. So this is 0. Like I said, you could force it a little bit more. So if it's less than 1, I don't know, you play a little. But this is basically sends you in the right direction to do the evaluation. If you want to spice it up a little on your own at home, you probably can relate this even better, because this is only going to work when the plane is at 0. But if I move my plane, so I'm sorry, not that. If I move my soft body plane and the other guy, let's say that if I move those guys somewhere there, then this script is useless, because the expression is only taking care of 0. What you want to do at home is, instead of saying if it's less than 0, you should say if it's less than the translation in x of this plane. So try that at home yourself. It was very simple. You only have to change in here. Okay, instead of saying if it's less than 0.5, you can just say whatever the name of that is. I think it's called p plane 1 that ty, I think is let me see if it complains. It's fine, right? So it doesn't complain. Ty is a short for translation in y. It's not in y, sorry, it's in x. In x. Okay, so this works fine. And basically this is going to do that. Right? So you can say p plane 1 that tx. So that works no matter where my plane is, which is great. So I can move this plane whatever, and the particle, if it's in front of the plane, it will dent it that way. If it's behind it, it will just turn off. So that works quite nicely. So that's good. Let me see, any last second questions? It's causing the bullets to bounce off each other. Oh no, we already talked about that. Amazing. Well, that's good. I'm glad you liked it. It was a bit of an improvised class, but I like those two. They're more fun sometimes. Any questions, Shobana? Any questions, Julius, before we go? Shobana, yes, you can do particle morphing from one object to another. We covered that on the goals class. So if you go to the recording for week 6 or week 7, when we're using particle goals, you can go particles to multiple pieces of geometry, and all you have to do is animate the goal weight from one to the other We can cover that if you want to talk a bit deeper on it next week. Remember to prepare some questions for me, and then we'll talk about it next class. We won't be covering rigid bodies in this course. Rigid bodies are covered at level 3, remember. So you have to watch the level 3 classes. All right, let's see what else these guys are writing here. Remember to have some questions ready for me for the next class. Sounds like a blast. Excellent. No pun intended. Perfect. All right, guys. Well, if everything is clear, then let me do my usual here. Stop sharing. If you're watching this recording, thank you. We're almost done with the course. I hope you enjoy. See you next week.